Hi, I'm Mandy, one of the co-owners and workers at Pilsen Community Books, and I am so excited to welcome you here tonight for a conversation with Gil Roth and Chicago's own Dmitry Samarov in celebration of Dmitry's newest book, All Hack, which is an illustrated work memoir about Dmitry's 12 years driving a cab in Chicago and Boston. A few notes about how tonight will go. I'll introduce them both in a second, and I'm going to hand the show over to them. But there is a chat, and so if you have any questions anytime during the event, feel free to just pop them in the chat, and I will pass them along to the gentleman of the evening. And also, you can pick up Dmitry's book on our website, www.pilsencommunitybooks.com. I highly recommend it. They're beautiful books. And I think you'll really want one after this conversation. Oh yeah, Dmitry, hold on. Yeah, go ahead.
You should say and advertise for Pilsen Community Books that it's one of only 2 actual stores that has that book. You can't get it on Amazon or the Ingram kiosk, bookshop.org or any of the other online retailers. The only place you can get it is Pilsen Community Books and one other store that's not hosting this event, so I'm not publicizing it.
Well, you heard it from the man himself. PilsenCommunityBooks.com. So without further ado, I'll introduce the gentleman of the evening. Gil Roth is the creator of the Virtual Memories Show, a weekly podcast featuring conversations with cultural figures, which you can find on YouTube, iTunes, and many other platforms. The show recently celebrated its 400th episode, and he has a lot of great guests coming up. I know that for a fact, so I recommend you check it out. And Dmitry Samarov paints and writes in Chicago. He is the author and illustrator of 5 books, one of which being All Hack, which is the reason we're here tonight. And he sends out a newsletter every Monday. Dmitry, I need to get on your newsletter list. That reminds me.
Yeah, you can sign up. It's on Tiny Letter. It's very easy to do.
Great.
And you can get my weekly little soapbox. Yeah.
An absurd amount of his work is collected at his website, which is now 16 years old. And I recommend that you buy his art and books and read some of his journalism. Okay, and I'll turn it over to you two.
Cool.
Great. Thanks so much, Mandy.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Mandy.
Dmitry, I guess this is an opening question. You and I first met in 2014 when you were promoting part of your cab memoirs. How did All Hack come together? What is the book and what's new, what's reconfigured? Tell us all about All Hack.
Well, funny you should ask. I actually wrote, anticipating this very question for readers that might have read the other 2 books. At the end of All Hack, I wrote a short thing which will kind of pave the way, I think, for this discussion. It's called "What Is This Book?" And I'll just read it really quickly. I've already published 2 books and 3 zines about my 12 years as a cab driver. So who needs another? It's a fair question. After I submitted the final manuscript of Hack, Stories from a Chicago Cab to University of Chicago Press sometime in 2010, I knew that there would be a second book because I was still driving and the stories kept coming at me. When it came out in 2011, I told friends I had more than enough for part 2. A few suggested, unhelpfully, that I should have waited and published it all in one volume. I was a first-time author with no knowledge of the industry. It was inconceivable to refuse a great university press after it had approached me unsolicited. Would I ever have another opportunity? Then, after a less reputable outfit published my second cab book, I started wishing for a do-over. Almost everything that could go wrong with that book did. In the years after, I wrote articles about the cab and rideshare industries and designed and published 2 more books. I got much better at writing and figured out a way to bring the creation of books closer to my work as a visual artist. In 2019, I decided that I wanted a chance of presenting all the cab writing I'd done in my own way. I reached out to the University of Chicago Press, and they generously allowed me to use material from the first book for this one. I rewrote, re-edited, and otherwise transformed the stories and artwork into this new final form. I was happy to fix a bunch of clunky sentences and have a last look back at the job that formed me as a writer. The book is a kind of obituary for the cab industry as I knew it, though I'll always think of anybody who gets paid to drive people places as a cab driver. I dedicate this book to all those who are still at it. So that's like a kind of like a cursory explanation of why I bothered to do this this weird thing, which is a sort of like a reconsidered or consideration remix kind of Criterion collection, best of all my cab stuff.
Now, what was it like for you revisiting your earlier writing and the drawings and paintings that went into both of the original volumes? Did you have more trepidation about looking back at old writing or looking back at old art, I guess?
Both were a real mixed bag. I mean, I cut a lot of both from this book. The book, I mean, the book is a good size. It's like 350 pages, but I cut a good big chunks out of both the other volumes, and reconfigured it pretty significantly. It's just, I mean, that first book that University of Chicago published was basically my grad school. Like I hadn't had any writing classes. I didn't know how you put together a book. I'd never taken, I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. And they taught me, and, nothing will sort of replace that first kind of like, the first baby or whatever. But I think in the intervening 10 plus years, I've just gotten a lot better at this, So there'd been enough time passed. I mean, the last of the cab driver writing was done in about 2012, So it's been, almost 8 years since I've written anything as an actual cab driver. So there was enough distance for me to sort of not be too close to the material to be able to judge it just as writing, and so I cut and cut and cut, and I did the best I could with it. There's some stuff that's it is what it is, as they say,
Sure.
Yeah.
What sort of things didn't make the cut, as it were? What sort of stuff do you look at and say, didn't need to be there. I'm glad I can winnow it down?
I think this was in the second book. I had an open letter to Mayor Rahm Emanuel, the former mayor of Chicago. Yeah. It got published in Chicago Magazine and like as a preview, like excerpt from the book. And like, I couldn't sorry. Is this a PG rated?
Awesome.
Sorry, I curse. I just couldn't leave it. I remember actually when I was working on that second book, I didn't like it. Something about it. And this was my chance to get rid of it. You know what I mean? That's the first thing that jumps out. More other than that, it was more on like a sentence to sentence level. There were still remnants, especially in the first book, of sort of, I don't know, things I'd cribbed from other writers as a new writer. Like weird turns of phrase that were like from some other time. You know what I mean? I had a weird reminder of this actually earlier this year when I reread Tropic of Cancer after about 20 years and being shocked at some of his turns of phrase that I knew I had used without knowing it, and it was like one of those oh no moments. So stuff like that.
There are worse influences you can have for writing. There's worse influences than Henry Miller for life lessons.
I was so happy to read that book that like how much I liked it, but also like there was this weird thing, like there was these moments where like this shining a mirror at you, like, oh, like call you on your bullshit kind of thing. So yeah, it was more like that, like making simpler sentences, not doing, I don't know, style for style's sake kind of thing, And yeah, there were some illustrations in those books that I absolutely hated. I'm not going to tell you which ones because they're not in the new one. All the ones in the new one are just fucking brilliant, you know.
Of course. Now,
Just
how different for you?
masterpiece.
Of course. How different for you is painting than writing? I know from from our conversations and your emails, for you, when you finish a painting, it's out of you and into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And writing, again, you have this longevity with, and this ability to return to older projects. Do you see them differing in that way in terms of how you conceive of them, or how they become an independent thing from you?
Well, I always think, like, I've never been like an artist or writer or any creative whatever that did private stuff just for me. I think of like every creative thing I do as some sort of conversation with some audience of somebody else, at least one person, somebody that
Sure.
sees it, reads it, whatever. I don't have any need to, talk to myself. The talking is the creation, you know what I mean? So it needs to be out there and it needs to live on its own. But this is like a rare chance to reconsider. It was like if you put it in music terms, like when, some band like put out some like demo tape or something before they got signed to the label, and then they got a chance to record the stuff again, professionally. Yeah. It's kind of like that. Weirdly enough, with the visual stuff, like in the last few months, I've gotten into this new for me thing called collage. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Never.
Collage, yeah, it's brand new. I discovered it for myself. No, but my version of collage is like ripping up and cutting up old drawings and reconfiguring them. So in that way, I think maybe it's related in some way to this like reconsideration of old stuff, to make it like have some sort of new life again. You know what I mean? Also, yeah, I think there's a chance with this cab writing, because it addresses a job that is basically just is about to be extinct. It's a thing. Sure. Like, from rotary phone or like horse and carriage days, like if somebody picks up this book, there's a lot of stuff in it that they'll think is of some other world that they're not familiar with, Yeah. And in that way, maybe I can present it anew for a new audience, a new age,
Mm-hmm. Now, what did cab driving teach you about each city? You drove in Boston and then in Chicago. And if we have Chicago area audience members, what would you want them to know about their city that you learned from all those years?
That the city, I mean, it really is. I forget who called it a patchwork first. It was a Carl Sandburg. Somebody called it a patchwork. It really is like block to block. It changes. Like in every part of the city, you can go from like a place that looks like a bombed out war zone to a place that looks like a posh, like almost suburban kind of like rich place, like within a couple of blocks, like all over the city. It's an amazingly like heterogeneous place, if you go to all the places. And that's the thing that cab driving taught me. I went to places that I would never go on my own, because unless you have a job like that, you have your routine. You go to your office or wherever your job is. You go home. You go to the 2 or 3 restaurants or bars that you like, the movie theater, wherever. Like prior to the apocalypse. I mean, Gil calls it the before times on his podcast. But yeah. Right.
Where the present is this whole situation, as I like to call it, with capitals. Yeah.
Yeah. It opened my mind and my eyes, my ears to people and places that I wouldn't have gone otherwise. So I'll forever be thankful to that job for that, Mm-hmm. And it exposed me to people and their stories. And like, I've written this, so I wrote this somewhere, but it was like every cab passenger was like, it was like a play starting, and it was an audience of one, and they would unburden their stories and tell me stuff about themselves, And
Yeah.
that kind of pushed me into writing. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, did you have that sort of attentiveness to other people and their stories previously? I know it's sort of imposed on you by the cab job. Had that been a trait of yours prior to this?
I mean, I'd always been a listener a lot more than a talker. I
Mhm.
always sort of liked absorbing, other people's worlds and a watcher, because I'd been always, since I have no memory of not making art, and making art is looking at things and trying to make marks, in reaction. So it was really a different version of that. It was just in words instead of pictures. And like, yeah, my whole creative thing is always taking things in like as a channel and putting them back out. I never ever think of any of it as coming from me, like from inside, There's the two different kinds of artists. There's the ones that work from inside out, and there's ones that work from outside in. I'm definitely an outside in kind of guy, That's my thing. I don't think any of it comes from me. It comes through me, if I'm doing it right.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
see that both in terms of writing and the visual arts?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Even if in some of this stuff, like I'm a some sort of participant, I'm not, yeah. It's always the stuff happening in front of my eyes or within, my
Yeah.
my ear, what I can hear or see, that's interesting. The stuff going on inside of me is always much less interesting to me, at least.
Yeah.
One of the complaints that people have had about my books, not only the cab books but the other books, is they don't learn enough about me. But I think you do in an indirect way. You know what I mean? I think careful readers do. Some have, but it's not really my thing to sort of like spill my guts in a certain way.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think I approach it the same. I need somebody other than me to really judge that for sure, I think.
Sure. Well, again, I mean, you refer to it as a work memoir, and in a
Hmm.
sense, it's about the work and what it does to the person as opposed to all of your story leading into it. As you said, you're coming into other people's plays. They're sitting down in the back of the cab, and I think as we talked about many years ago, you get middles. People just start,
Yeah,
talking, and
that's
you just happen
I
to be there
forget
for the
who
middle of
told.
their
I think it
story.
was yeah, my high school friend John Hodgman, who said that like life is all middles. I'm sure he didn't invent that term, but it's stuck with me. That life is
Hmm.
all middles. I mean, there's only one beginning and end for any of us, and we know what that is. But in
Hmm.
books, especially, you need a beginning, middle, end. In a movie or whatever. So you impose these structures on them, and so yeah, with the challenge of putting together something like a book about short cab rides, you need to have beginnings, middles, and ends. Uh, so I've done that differently in each of the three iterations of the cab thing.
Now, how did you conclude you were done with hacking?
How
Was
did
there was there a moment of I have to give my notice? When
well
did that really occur to you?
well the good/bad thing about that is that we're like my whole cab career I was an independent contractor, so I didn't have to give anybody notice. I worked for
Yeah.
myself the whole time, but I just had to get my deposit back from them, which took some time, but and stop renting cabs. But basically in 2012, at the beginning of 2012, Uber came into Chicago, and I was one of the first drivers recruited by Uber because of Hack. Their
Mhm.
whole strategy when they came into new markets was to recruit like cab drivers and limo drivers at first. And I was sort of like, the semi-famous cab driver. And, they gave me an iPhone with the app, and it was like a crystal ball into the future. there was not much work at all, but like I knew that this was how it was going to be, and the cab companies totally blew it, they didn't anticipate that they'd need to change, and they let Uber in, and Uber destroyed them, and like by the summer of 2012, I was trying to I was getting ready to write the second book, and I did a Kickstarter to take some time off to really put it all together. And while doing that, I decided just not to come back, because I had a real strong, 9 years of it in Chicago was kind of enough. I was burnt out. I just didn't want to drive every day anymore. I was driving 60 to 80 hours a week, mind you, like while doing this writing and art. So I was trying to, I was in the middle of a new relationship. I was moving in with a woman. Like there was all these changes going on. So I was going to try not to do that, try to really do the art and the writing and just have some part-time gig, trying to live a more physically healthy lifestyle, like sitting on your ass 12, 14, 18 hours a day, not good for you. I'll tell you.
I figured you're headed towards deep vein thrombosis, and
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of problems, physical, mental, otherwise, but just if nothing else, just the low grade kind of tension of being watchful of everything and everyone around you at all times, the drivers, the passengers, everything, I was done. I put in my time, it was, sure. I didn't miss it for a second. I was ready to leave, Yeah.
In the afterword, you say you don't miss anything about the gig. Does that hold up?
Yeah. I mean, if maybe the only thing is tracking the changes in the city, now, I primarily get around on my bicycle, especially since COVID, only every now and then again I'll take a bus or a train, but very rarely. So some building will be demolished, and I'll just be totally surprised. But those are tracking changes in a city that I tracked in real time as a cab driver, that I don't anymore. But I'm willing to forego that, That's
sure.
Probably the only thing, yeah.
Do you still have cab dreams at all?
It comes back every now and again. It's like like everybody has those school dreams, you wake up and you realize it's the end of the semester and you didn't study or whatever, like the big test, or you can't find the classroom. I have those. Or I don't know where I'm going.
Yeah. And were there driving habits that you had to shake afterwards, or were you rarely near a car after
well, now, I mean, it's sort of a weird, I drive once a month now, on average, I have, we have zip cars, you rent by the hour, or if I've been going to visit my parents in Boston, and so I'll rent a car for a week. It all comes back. I mean, it's it really is like riding a bike. It's this skill I have, that I can do without paying attention, but driving has always been work for me. I learned very late in life. I learned when I was about to graduate art school, and a year later I was a cab driver. So there's no such thing as driving for pleasure for me. I won't this idea of taking a drive. It's totally alien to me,
Yeah.
So it all comes back. Yeah. I'm a really good driver. I'll say that without, I think it's actually accurate. I'm a really good driver. But I don't miss it or like it. It's not a pastime for me. You know what I mean?
Sure. Now, how different are you from the Dmitry of those years? I mean, it's one thing to revisit the prose, to revisit the pictures, but the person who you carefully cloak within there, do you see yourself differing?
Well, I'm going to continue to carefully cloak the person, and let
I thought I'd catch you.
You could probably answer that better than me. I mean, you've known me as a cab driver. Actually, you've only known me as an ex-cab driver. Yeah, so maybe you can't answer that. It's funny. I mean, I've had pretty much all the or night gigs, side gigs that I've had my whole life have been service industry. And so I'm very accustomed to presenting a personality to the public or to the customers, that cloaks whatever it is I am really pretty well, and now I don't have to do that very much. You know what I mean? Because I don't have to deal with the clientele, except for one of my gigs is doing pet portraits, and they're so I have to be nice, but sometimes, but much less than I used to be. Pretend to be nice.
Have to tell people, oh no, your dog's beautiful, when in fact it's an ugly dog.
Short story long, I don't know that I am able to answer that question.
Now, is tending bar and the other sorts of gigs easier, more opportunities for sketching or writing? What do you find with current occupations in comparison?
Well, now former. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever go back to bartending. I bartended basically for the last 5 years until the shutdown. And it was an extension of the same thing.
Yeah.
It's back to being the fly on the wall, back to being kind of part of the scenery, because you're delivering drinks and it's people in their own worlds on dates or totally consumed with their phone or whatever, and they don't notice or know that I'm listening. And in that way, it's similar to the cab, It's a little more exposed. Some of the regulars knew that I had this other life, that I wasn't just the guy that was bringing them their craft beer, I had a few weird moments at the bar. I had this kid Google me in front of my face, which was okay, what am I supposed to stand here? What am I supposed to do now? But not so often, mostly the thing is that most people, they're into their own shit. They want to do they don't care, about you or me. I mean, they want their beer.
No, me also. Nobody cares about me. It's okay.
I care about you, Gil. You're my friend. Come on.
It's with a touching moment. We should jump to one of the audience's questions.
Yeah, is there some kind of medley, some kind of sappy medley music promo thing?
I've got the sad trombone from Price is Right. I can play that if we need to. But one of the audience members asks, you've made art in many different mediums, and you talk about witnessing many little plays during your time as a cab driver. Have you ever thought about trying your hand at drama writing?
No. One of my gigs up until recently, COVID, was reviewing plays, weirdly enough, which I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed going to the plays and writing little reviews of them. But no, there's a lot of different kinds of writing that are completely alien to me. One of which is playwriting. I'm sort of trying my hand at this point at a sort of novel, sort of a fiction, but based on the experiences as a bartender. But it's got to be fiction for the most part, because I have to protect the guilty and stuff. I have to change names. But as far as the mechanics and the form of playwriting or screenplay writing, there's actually a small bit in this new cab book about. Sure. So when my first cab book came out, it was immediately optioned by a filmmaker who I've since become friends with. Nothing has really come of it. It kind of made the rounds, but he wrote all these screenplays. He was going to make a TV show based on Hack, and what he did and creating these plot points and recurring characters and all this stuff was, I read it with fascination and with absolutely no interest of trying it, like none. So sorry, no no plays in the near future. I mean, who knows what'll happen in a few years, but not in the near future,
Understood. So one of the things about All Hack, as well as your previous book, you're self-publishing now and designing the book yourself and doing the whole shebang under Pictures and Blather. How's that been different for you? And what have you had to learn about, publishing, about the whole, making the package and making a good looking book?
It's been a learning experience on every front. So like the sort of doing everything myself thing started with 3 books ago with a book called Music to My Eyes, which was published through a local indie press called Tortoise Books. But basically, because I had a really specific way that I wanted the book to look, I wanted it to be a hardcover. I wanted to design it myself. I did most of the work. I put up a chunk of the money to have it printed. Like it was sort of like it was a partnership in a way, and it was that experience kind of pushed me into doing the whole thing myself, because if you do 95% of the work yourself, you should get 95% of the whatever meager earnings that come out of it. So it's been really interesting. Like on a creative level, it's brought writing and book making closer to visual art for me. Like it's come into a scale into a sphere that I understand and have been working at since I was a child, in a way. Like when the first book came out, I wrote the book and I gave them, the images that I wanted, and I sent it off to these mystery people and they did stuff with it somewhere. And it took years. I mean, because it was a University of Chicago press, which publishes, the Chicago Manual of Style. It was peer reviewed. It took like 2 years, for that book to come out, basically. But ever since then, like through my experience with the second book, whose publisher I'm not going to mention because they're scum, they hired this kid to design the book who wrecked it, and ever since then I thought, well, I think I could do a better job fucking up my own book than this guy did, so I've been refining that ever since. But as far as like other aspects of the publishing and sort of like other literary industry, it's an ongoing and sobering and kind of what's word? I'm losing the word that I'm looking for. Humbling experience, because I came up against this giant monolith called Ingram, which distributes pretty much every book everywhere. It's it's too bad that the viewers at home can't see the face when I said Ingram, but Ingram is a thing people in the book industry don't seem to want to talk about, and I keep yelling and screaming about it, and nobody wants to talk about it. But it's it's the only game in town, and if you're not on Ingram, you don't exist. Yeah. And so these last 3 books don't show up anywhere, like in stores that call themselves independent. If you do a search on any independent bookstore, pretty much it's what you're doing is searching Ingram's inventory. Right. And if you're not on Ingram, you don't exist. And I'm like the guy like outside of the gates, like in the trial, like banging on the door, like not being let in, Sure. Or the castle or whatever, it's some sort of Kafka thing, like where
Dmitry, if it's any consolation, a lot of booksellers agree with you. So.
Oh, good. It's funny, like people got all excited about bookshop.org, but bookshop.org is Ingram, basically. Yeah. Like it is Ingram. I called. I asked them, like, can I have a storefront? Nope, I can't. Maybe someday in the future, but not anytime soon, So it's this weird situation that if you don't want to play by these rules, you can't play, And so I've made this weird bargain where I figured out a cost-effective way to put out a thing that it's very hard to spread the word about. And don't even, like overseas, like I have this one poor guy in Ireland that loves my books. It cost him more than the price of the book to get my books.
Yeah.
It's so fucked up. $25 to $30 for me to send a book to Ireland. Isn't that crazy? It's just crazy.
That's why when I did. Oh, sorry. Go on. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to figure out some sort of distribution deal with somebody somewhere. But on the creative end, it's been massively rewarding, and I think I'm on the right track. But as far as participating or being part of like the book thing, I I'm nowhere, so I don't know.
Did your work as an artist and promoting your art the way you have over the years help at all in terms of the hustle with bookstores, in terms of talking to them about carrying your stuff?
I'm not sure. It prepared me for a whole lot of rejection,
which is good too.
Being ignored, like I knew, like one of the advantages of having your first book come out when you're like over 40 is that like you don't think you're going to be the next fucking, Stephen King or Philip Roth or whatever, whoever, J.K. Rowling, that you're going to have to keep hustling. And I was selling those cab books out of the cab, myself. I've hand sold more of my books than any outlet, and probably will for a long time, that didn't faze me exactly. I wish it was easier. But I haven't found that channel yet, that'll make it possible. Some kind of like sweet spot, like where I get to do things the way I want to do them and get people to know about them. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, like I've really helped myself by quitting social media too. I've really helped myself there.
Yeah, I was tweeting about this event and thinking, well, Dmitri's not going to know that I did that. I guess, I'll hashtag him. He can go search for himself on Twitter. But yeah, it's, those trade-offs we have to make, I guess, to publicize something versus giving up some of our soul to the social media monster.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't tell people how to live their lives, but quitting social media, whatever, going on 6 years ago, saved my sanity. Like I quit social media, before the run up to the 2016 election, for instance, there's a lot of shit that like I get much later than other people. And I'm so happy, like it lets me get through my days. You know what I mean? So that trade-off is worth it to me. To not have I don't get to pimp whatever like product I have on offer like the second it arrives, and keep doing it. But that never really felt good either. Like I was on Twitter for 7 years and I liked it best when I was still driving a cab, when like I'd compose a tweet about some crazy shit that had just happened. It was my way of taking notes. But after I quit the cab, there was not really a fun like comedy thing to it anymore. That's what it's best for, like it's great for that. But other than that, I don't miss it.
And we'll also note that a whole bunch of them are excerpted in All Hack by Dmitry Samarov.
Yeah.
We do include a bunch of the tweets. So.
Yeah, there's a whole chapter that. So yeah, well, like one of the fun things I got to do with this book is add new illustrations that actually specifically. What page are those tweets on?
They were near the end.
They are. Here they are. I found them. So yeah, let's see. I don't know.
There you go.
You can see. Yeah, there's a picture of a turkey. So this turkey and a couple of his friends illustrate all my tweets. Figure, turkeys. It's a bird, sort of. But yeah, those are some of those illustrations were actually meant for something else. I just thought that they were appropriate to tweets. So that was one of the fun things I got to do in this book. Some newer stuff I got to add. I also reproduced the two zines that I made at the very beginning of the whole project, which is around about 20 years ago, which I cut and pasted and put together Kinko's actual zines, that are long gone. Like, I don't even have clean copies of those zines anymore. But I got to reproduce them in here, So that was fun. So that's like the DVD extras,
Again, the director's commentary and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now, again, the whole project for you began out of the zines and the blog writing, and that sort of form that doesn't really exist nowadays. Do you miss that, or does your weekly email sort of serve the same purpose?
It does, yeah. I think, like, to me, so much of the internet, what it's good at is sort of like a rough draft sketchbook kind of thing, That's what the newsletter, like a lot of the newsletter now, and it's like I think the least popular things I put in the newsletter are basically excerpts from my new book about being a bartender. But like, it's me trying out the stuff, like rough drafts of it, And I think of the blog version of Hack as that too, because those things went through a lot of different edits and iterations before they became an actual physical book. There's so many. That was one of the sort of like minefields of putting that first book together. Is like, you really want another one of these fucking blog to book things, Like, I didn't want that. You know what I mean?
It was a movement.
There's some. Yeah, I know. Now nobody has blogs. Nobody has websites. Like, I have this crazy website that I've been running for 16 years now. Nobody has websites anymore. Nobody uses, I just got a new laptop for my birthday. I turned 50 on Monday, and my folks and my brother has chipped in for a new laptop that I'm using right now, which is great. But like, I don't have a smartphone. Like, I take conscious measures to limit, or circumscribe my exposure to the great maw, this.
I think of it less as a maw and more as a constantly vomiting stream that's just always shooting at us. But either way,
it's the chasm, or like, whichever direction you prefer. But
yeah. Now, another one of the audience members asks, do you think book publishing will go the way of cab driving? They both seem to be occupations from another era. And I think that ties in with your Ingram comments. Where do you see book publishing going?
Well, one of the things, like one of the like kind of long range bets I'm making on making these kind of limited edition. So yeah, like these last three books, they're all hardcover with like foil stamping, like design covers, end papers, and they're signed and numbered. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to go more the way of like vinyl, like the record business, where the only part of the physical business that's growing is records.
Sure.
Like records, LPs just passed CDs this year again, weirdly, in sales. Well, because nobody needs CDs anymore. CDs suck, but I think it's the physical, like the only reason to have a physical book is for people that value objects, like in a way.
You could sort of see the bookshelves behind me. I'm not sure how visible
I'm making the shit for you, Gil, basically.
Awesome. My Dmitry collection is up over there. I'll take a picture of that and send that over after.
Yeah. So not cab driving, and really, like, they call it cab, it's really high time that like the ride share, which is a really shitty word, should just be called cab drive. Like, those are cabs, like there's always going to be a place for public drivers, like for people that don't want to drive or can't drive for one reason or another, that need to get places. So there's always going to be a place for literature, like what form it takes, who the fuck knows. If anybody wants my books for their screens, I'll send them a free PDF. Just email me. But there's kind of no reason. You'll lose a lot taking in these last 3 books on a screen.
They're very much the physical thing. That's to me. You've done a great job with the actual, the package of the book, the physicality of it. They feel great. They're perfectly sized. With my gigantic hands, they fit really well. But it's a really good design you've done. And
Thank you. But like that's the stuff that matters to me. Like if I'm going to make a thing like this, it's going to be a thing. If you just want, like these horrible like terms like content or like, words or whatever, like content, which always makes me think of filler, like it's like these toothpaste tubes that need to be filled with stuff and you fill it with content. Like I'm not making content. I'm making a fucking book, So what the future of that is, or how big an audience it could be, probably not gigantic. I mean, not as much as, like a TikTok video or whatever, but or a Marvel universe thing. It never will be like the center of the culture. But like I come, my first first love and most primary like occupation as a painter, which is an art that peaked sometime, depending on who you talk to, in the 19th century, 18th century, I don't know, a long time ago, before photography. So like next to that, like 800 books is like super like selling out like mass media. That's the way I try to think of it.
Now, another member of the audience asks, will you ever write an open letter to Lori Lightfoot like you did to Rom?
What would I write to Lori about? I don't, man,
I'm I'm a New Jersey guy, so I don't know from Chicago, what
her choice of hats, like.
I mean, she's an incredibly she's a lot more interesting a character to me than Rom is. Rom is Rom is like a fucking like a cartoon villain, He showed up. So here's Tuesday, I lasted 10 minutes trying to watch that fucking shit show debate. But before that, like one of the talking heads was fucking Rahm Emanuel was up there. Like, and he's just like, like he's like these like subterranean creatures that shouldn't surface. And I wish he'd fucking disappear and go away. I don't feel that way about Lori Lightfoot. I know people that do, but I think she's actually trying to do the right thing at least some of the time. She's a weird character. I don't know if she has any interest in cab driving, and I don't know that I have any interest in cab driving. I certainly have no interest in Uber, although I wrote a couple of essays towards the end of this book about like rideshare and Uber and Lyft taking over. Since I don't have a smartphone, I can't actually take an Uber. So unless somebody puts me in one, my experiences as a passenger have been 70 to 80% bad. They're amateurs.
So?
Well, they're amateurs. They're totally relying on technology. They don't know the cities they work in. They're hugely underpaid. I mean, they're paid worse than cab drivers. They're getting paid $3 an hour. A study said, because of all the hidden expenses. It's fucked. I mean, it's not sustainable. I feel bad for them. One time, this poor woman, she drove all the way from the suburbs to pick me up, to drive me from Bridgeport, which is on the south side, to the north side, and her GPS broke down and she was lost. And she actually needed directions from me. Lucky enough, she had an old cab driver, and I took her down one of the main thoroughfares in the city. She didn't know about it because she's used to the highway and used to GPS. Yeah. It's a fucking shit. It's a disaster. And that whole thing of kind of like blurring the line between professional and kind of like this gig economy thing is all wrong. It's bad. Like, I don't want to pretend like my pal is taking me, like.
Yeah.
And it's like you see them kind of mutating. Like, they have top lights. They're slowly morphing back into taxis. They're like, it's like in that in between thing between the Wolfman and the guy. Like. It's somewhere in between, and it's trying to be one thing, it's neither. You know what I mean? It's a mess. But once the traditional cabs are completely extinct, all the cities will step in and they'll want their part, and they'll regulate it, and they'll make them get proper insurance. All the stuff that they're not doing, and I don't know.
Yeah, I saw they're allowed to re-enter London after years of legal battle, and I think that's part of the requirements, was essentially turning them into a new cab service as opposed to.
Well, they are a cab service. I mean, they're now like doing all the shitty stuff. Like they're leasing cars to people at really bad rates. They're offering financing that's very bad. Like bad terms. They're doing all the shit that cab companies did for decades. Yeah.
With a smiley face.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, if Lori wants to talk about that, I could talk about that with her. I don't know. If she has a dog or a cat she needs a portrait of, I'd be happy to make a portrait for her.
Or the bookshelf paintings you were doing also. She might have good bookshelves.
Oh yeah. I bet she reads. We could probably talk about some stuff. I mean, the thing about all the like Lori Lightfoot and some other like local politicians is they look, I mean, they all look like Lincoln in comparison to the fucking shit show up top. Sure. They all look amazing, like whatever their faults, like they look like grown-ups trying to solve a problem, trying.
So that feeds into my last question for you, which is, how's your pandemic? How's it affecting your painting, your writing?
It's fucking awesome. I'm the best pandemic ever. No, I mean, the thing about it is that so much, like I lead a pretty solitary existence. Bartending, once or twice a week, spending huge chunks of my time on my own in my house or just out and about, but by myself. So much of this, it's not a leap. Like I see people like that are so kind of traumatized or
bereft.
Because they don't, all the things that they never thought about, like all the time spent by themselves, like they're forced to do now. It's not a huge challenge. I mean, like the masks suck. I hate the masks. I'd love to just go to a bar and have a drink, which is not going to happen anytime soon. But it's affected me much less than a ton of people I know, and a ton more people, like what I see and read about. You know what I mean? I made my peace with being fairly solitary a long time ago, and I'm okay with it.
Mm-hmm. Do you find it affecting the content at all of what you're painting? Has it seeped into your subject choices or anything?
Well, I have this other upheaval that went on. It was that at the beginning of May, I moved apartments, so I'm in a new space that I'm still sort of getting used to, and then I started doing these collages that are sort of like a weird. It's a new thing for me, and it's kind of like a reappraisal of older stuff, and it's a way of working that I haven't really done since I was like a teenager. So I'm trying new stuff, but during this whole lockdown, basically this all happened during all of this. I did the whole thing, sent it off to an editor, waited like over a month for her to get back to me with her edits, and then designed the whole thing, sent it to the printer, got it back from the printer. I was going to wait till maybe next year for the 10th anniversary of the first book, but then I thought, well, this is a lot.
Who's going to remember that?
Yeah, like there may not be a next year, so why don't I just do this now? It's concentrated my attention more because there's less distractions, so that's kind of good. I mean, there are positive side effects of this, some of this stuff, some things that maybe if people keep doing aren't all bad. You know what I mean?
Like washing our hands.
Yeah, and quite honestly, if I don't ever have to be in another crowd again, that'll be fine with me. I'm not into crowds. Not a fan.
And you always know the real last question I ask related to my virtual memory show podcast. Who have you been reading?
Who have I been I've been rereading.
Yeah.
I'm reading Suttree by Cormac McCarthy, which I last read when I was probably 25 years ago, long before like I did any writing of my own, and that's been really interesting. I had my Cormac McCarthy period sometime in my 20s, maybe early 30s. I pretty much read all of his stuff, but in my memory, this was the book that I liked the best, and I've been enjoying it. But it's weird. I definitely see it like as somebody that's done a ton of writing since then. It's different. It's I mean, yeah, it's funny. And the thing that sent me down this, like made me pick up this book again was just randomly a movie that I watched, a movie set in Mexico that made me think of Cormac McCarthy. It was like, and then it made me think, like, what would it be like to read a Cormac McCarthy book now, And I tried it. Other than that, I'm reading, I've read a couple of things for review. I just recently published a review of Luc Sant's new collection of essays, which is amazing, that everybody should get. That was great. But yeah, Suttree is the main thing. Then I'm reading. So I'm working on this bar book. So I pick up things that are related, like maybe, I don't know. Gun to my head, maybe my favorite book is Joseph Mitchell's Up in the Old Hotel, and that it's got a great thing about an old bar in New York, which still exists, called McSorley's. So I reread that recently, and that totally stood up. I think those are the main things. Oh, there was
this awfully good.
Yeah, there's a short story collection called Fuckface and Other Stories by Leah Hampton. That's really good. Very funny.
And I hope these are all available at Pilsen Community Books, right?
They'll order them for you. Yeah.
Gil, I want to hear what you've been reading, because those bookshelves are very beautiful.
Jeez. I spent... I know it's crazy. I do a lot of reading for the podcast, but I had this bizarre binge on Yom Kippur because I lead a life of excitement. I read Somewhere Becoming Rain, which was a collection of writing by Clive James about the poet Philip Larkin. Thing was, I'd never really read Larkin before, so I thought I would break every time James references a Larkin poem, read the poem and come back. Didn't work because he has 25 citations in a row, so I had to pick and choose for good spots. But spent Monday reading that, reading some great Eddie Campbell comics. He's now a Chicago resident. What was the other big thing? Oh, well, every year on Yom Kippur, I read this wonderful story by Bruce J. Friedman called When You're Excused, You're Excused, about a guy who wants a reason not to go to shul on Yom Kippur. He wants to go to the gym instead, and his whole life falls to pieces when he makes that one decision. But those are the ones I've worked on just in the span of Sunday into Monday. Generally, I've been working on a bunch of Martin Amis for an upcoming podcast with him. There's a book coming in a couple of weeks by this designer, illustrator, cartoonist named Ryan Hughes. It's called XX. It's like 1,000 pages long. Came out in the UK, and we're going to record a podcast in November. And I'm anticipating / dreading just because of the sheer size of it. But it promises to be a great read also. So that's what's on the horizon. I have on my website kept a list of every book that I've finished since 1989 when I started college, which is terrifying to most people. But I also keep that as a spreadsheet here. So yeah, I can go on forever about that sort of stuff. How about you, Mandy? What have you read lately?
Yeah, what are you reading, Mandy?
I've really gotten into, and I think maybe Dmitry, we've talked about this, the Croatian writer Dasa Durnik, and I'm probably butchering her name.
No, I think that's how it's pronounced. A friend of mine in Australia has been praising the hell out of her. I've never read her, but she's supposed to be great.
Yeah, she's incredible. A friend of mine recommended me to her, and I'm obsessed now in a way that I haven't been obsessed with an author in a long time. So that feels very, very good.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys both for joining me. This was a very delightful event. Gil, tell me where we can find your podcast again, Virtual Memory Show.
I have one of the least understandable URLs ever. It's chimeraobscura.com/VM for virtual memories. Go to VMS Pod, so Virtual Memory Show Podcast, or just look me up on Twitter, VMS Pod, or Instagram, same thing, and you'll find links to the show from there. So.
Amazing. And Dmitry, please plug your website. It's a great website.
Yeah, it's DmitrySamarov.com. That's DmitrySamarov.com. And yeah, you can sign up for the weekly newsletter that we sort of talked about every now and again. But yeah, I send a newsletter every Monday with writing and images and stuff.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I try.
Great. Well, thank you both for joining us.
Yeah, I'll implore to make everybody go physically or virtually to Pilsen Community Books and buy my book and a lot of other books.
Yeah, buy some Dmitry's books.
Hack.
Buy Philip Larkin. Buy some Martin Amis. Buy some Dasa Durnik. You'll be ready to go.
Awesome. Cool.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks so much.